we were ambushed. Everybody got separated. I found myself with the choice of looking for my platoon, or eventually I made the decision to get out and try and get back to friendly lines. And I was captured about 2 hours outside Mariupol. And we all know that's the most dangerous time, is that initial capture. On the initial capture, I was stabbed in the leg, electrocuted, beaten, cattle prodded, tasered. And then when I went to Donetsk, which is like a black site, which is off-grid, I was then electrocuted on the ears, beaten, tortured. And it was about keeping that self-motivation, keeping that hope alive while I was in the black site.
So when war broke out in Ukraine, Shaun Pinner was a retired British soldier. He was living in Mariupol with his wife and family. Then the invasion, and Shaun joined the Ukrainian armed forces and fought in the front line. He sets out his extraordinary experiences there and from then on in a new book, Live, Fight, Survive. And I'm very happy to say Shaun's here with me in the studio. Welcome to you, Shaun.
My pleasure.
Good to have you here. Shaun, can I just ask you first of all, how it was you ended up in that front line? A bit more about you.
2018, I moved to Mariupol. Fell in love with Mariupol. Met my wife. A friend of mine was working in Mariupol as an EOD specialist, and he asked me if I was interested in instructing Ukrainian soldiers. And for 2 years, I was instructing Ukrainian soldiers in Mariupol. I got married, fell in love with my wife Larissa, and in order to stay in the country, the laws changed, so I had to move from that job and joined the Marines, Ukrainian Marines, on a 3-year contract. And I was on routine deployment when the invasion happened.
Right. And just before we get into that, because your story is really quite extraordinary, what was your service in the British Army? What did you do there?
I was a Royal Anglian, 1st Battalion. Originally started in 3rd Battalion, but they were amalgamated. And I left in 1999, and I spent 9 years, 3 tours of Northern Ireland. I was in Sarajevo and Bosnia in the early 90s. And really, after that, I was in hazardous waste management for 15 years, set up my own business. But I was looking for something different, a sense of belonging. And that's how I ended up looking to going back to what I really knew and loved, was being in the army.
Yeah, so tours in Northern Ireland, served in Sarajevo. So you've seen action.
Lots.
Yeah, a good deal of that. And so you ended up in the front line, as we say, in Ukraine. I'd like to hear some of your memories of that and your colleagues in the trenches, where we've heard the stories of civilian recruits leaving civilian life in Ukraine, and volunteers suddenly pitched into this most brutal fighting. Just tell me, what was that like for you and for the men around you?
Well, I'd spent a long number of years training Ukrainian troops. And I was very well documented in saying before the invasion that it's not going to be a walkover. And a handful of guys were there training Ukrainians who knew what they were capable of. And obviously the day of the invasion, I was in a forward observation point about 800 metres forward of the front line, the first line. And I couldn't have got any further forward than that. The day of the invasion, the winters are incredibly cold. Minus 28 is the worst I've been in. Everything is frozen, everything is cold, you're sleeping with your water. It's just like the Somme. All those pictures you see of fighting in trenches.
Just attritional warfare, mud, dreadful conditions and cold. And I guess fear. I mean, you are something of a veteran, so had some experience of this, but many of those around you had none. And what a nerve-shredding experience for them.
It was. Some of them, it was their first experience of war. They had heart and they were very fit and motivated. I trained with them, very determined. But it was their first experience of war. So I found myself being a leader amongst, I was a section commander, first Brit to be run a position in Ukraine, which was quite a proud moment for me. And I was also the first foreigner to complete all the parachute elements and parachute training and jump as a Ukrainian soldier. So I wasn't a mercenary, I wasn't a tourist, war tourist. I was there because I'd learned Russian, married a Ukrainian, and lived there for a very long time.
Yeah. I mean, how do you go about, calming soldiers, who are, a couple of weeks before were working in an office? How do you go about calming their nerves when they're under fire within moments of death?
It is very difficult. A lot of the times you're running past people and just give you a nod. And they're busy doing their thing. I was lucky. We was in a very good unit, the 1st Battalion, quite a nostalgic battalion. They were all trained. So I didn't really have any of that with my platoon, any of that novice, new They was new tour, but they'd gone through basic training. They'd had a lot of instruction, and they were very determined. The problem came with reservists that were called in who had no training after that. But my unit was exceptionally good. But yeah, they weren't trained. They took a lot of satisfaction from myself, who could give them a lot of instruction.
Yeah, and we've seen all the evidence of the soldiers there and how motivated they are to defend their homeland
Absolutely.
against the invader. Now, you were captured.
Yeah.
The order came to withdraw, to seek safety. That was the order from on high, and you did that. But you were captured, and we've been seeing stories in recent days about, well, systematic torture by Russian forces in Ukraine. And you were held in what's called a dark site, where this was going on around you. Can you give us some idea of what that experience was like?
Very scary. I'd play my escape and evasion. Like you said, on the escape and evasion, we were ambushed. Everybody got separated. I found myself with a choice of looking for my platoon, or eventually I made a decision to get out and try and get back to friendly lines. And I was captured about 2 hours outside Mariupol. And we all know that's the most dangerous time, of that initial capture. On the initial capture, I was stabbed in the leg, electrocuted, beaten, cattle prodded, tasered. And then when I went to Donetsk, which is like a black site, which is off grid, I was then electrocuted on the ears, beaten, tortured. And it was about keeping that self-motivation, keeping that hope alive while I was in the black site.
Were the Russian soldiers your torturers? What a dreadful story it is to hear this, Shaun. Were your torturers trying to get information out of you, or was this torture for its own sake?
Initially, no. It was very much seemed to be just random questions. There wasn't really much information gathering. They had my ID. They were looking through my social media. But really, they'd left me alone when I got to the black site for a couple of days before they really started to work on me, which I was always told that the first 36 hours are, that's where the information is most valuable. But we had already abandoned our positions, so I wasn't going to give them anything that they really could use.
Yeah, and I know you've had some training in surviving capture as part of your British Army training. And I know it was part of the role that you took on to keep the morale up of the poor souls who, like you, had been captured by these Russian forces and faced the kind of awful treatment you're describing to us now. How did you do that? How do you keep the morale up of men in those conditions?
Well, firstly, I was one of the only people that had any formal training. I was with two NGOs that had no military training. I'd done SEER some 30 years ago, so it was drawing on all those experiences. And then I sort of fell into that leadership role. And when you're captured, you can't really show yourself as being a leader. But the guys I was with, it's largely down to them. The gallows humour we had, the humour we had to keep going. We picked each other up. We named the bad days, the weight, we give it a name. And we were able to then help each other get through that bad patch, talking about home, making people laugh, and finding the funny side of some of the craziest things.
Finding the funny side of it. Now, that sounds like a feat almost, well, beyond my imagination. And your escape is a story in itself, Shaun, isn't it? Can you tell us more?
Well, we initially got early September. We got the inkling we might be exchanged, and when we were exchanged, it was the most horrendous time. We had 13 hours in stress positions being transported from Makivka, which is in Donetsk, to Rostov-Don, where we were beaten again. We didn't know what was going on, and we didn't really know we were being released until the door shut on the plane, and they said, once we get out of Russian airspace, you're free. And then while I was getting changed, they give me a medical, they give me some new clothes, and when I was coming out, there was an old guy talking to John Harding, and when I spoke to him, he asked me where I was from. I said, London. I said, where are you from? He said, London. I said, you really do look like Roman Abramovich. He went, I am Roman Abramovich. Which I said, and then John said, well, he's more interested why you didn't buy West Ham, which straight off the bat, he said, because Chelsea was closer to my house.
Yeah, of course, Roman Abramovich played a significant role in exchanges, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the former owner of Chelsea. I mean, what now for you, Shaun? Any thought of going back, or have you done your bit and you're doing your bit now by telling your story?
No, part of it is, well, yeah, you've hit on that. I tell the story. I've been writing the book. I talk with NATO countries now about my experience. Because of my SEER training, I can talk about what worked, what didn't work, how we got through it. And I travelled Sweden, Denmark, Norway. I'm going to Canada in October to talk to them. I've been so busy this year, and it's been quite a whirlwind, really, and the interest in the story, and especially the resilience, like the book really brings out the resilience, not just with me. If you take me out of the equation, it tells you about the will to fight from the Ukrainians, who are fighting for their own sovereignty, their own country, and their own destiny.
Okay, Shaun, thank you so much for coming in and telling your story. I was about to say it's a pleasure. It can't be a pleasure to hear a story as dark as yours, but it was absolutely absorbing. And I wish you all the very best for your future and with your new book.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Shaun Pinner, thank you.